This morning, we're going to be looking at the question, is social drinking permitted under the law of Christ? All right, is social drinking permitted under the law of Christ? Well, first off, let us discuss two things. What is social drinking and what is the law of Christ? Let's ask those questions first. Social drinking is going to be drinking alcohol casually. Drinking alcohol for either the express purpose of getting drunk or even not the express purpose of getting drunk. Now, that's going to be an outcome, not even for that, just as a casual means of using a drug, which is alcohol. Alcohol is a drug, and it's completely legal. There was a time when it wasn't, but it's completely legal here and in many countries around the world, easily obtainable. So social drinking would be that of drinking alcohol for the sake of just drinking alcohol. That would be it. And is that permissible under the law of Christ? Well, let's discuss what is the law of Christ. The law of Christ, also known as the perfect law of liberty, but it's not the liberty to do evil or liberty to sin. It's not that. It's having been liberated from sin, liberated from the shackles, from the bonds of it, liberated from so much darkness, so many lies. That's that law of liberty, and it is perfect. What is the law of Christ? Is it only what's in the red letters in the New Testament, if you have a red letter version? No, it's the entire New Testament. The entire New Testament is the law of Christ. Jesus, in John chapter 16, spoke to His apostles that He was going to leave them, but He was not going to leave them as just babes in the woods, because they needed to be taught more. And He would have taught them more, except He said, you cannot bear it now. But He was going to ascend into heaven, and when He did, He was going to send down what's called the Comforter, called the Helper, also specifically the Holy Spirit, who is going to guide them into all truth. And I do believe it was last week when we read those verses concerning that the Holy Spirit would not speak things of His own authority, but what He was given. That's what He would give, and they would be guided into all truth. Okay. What Jesus is telling them is that there is more teaching they were going to receive. It wasn't going to be limited to what He told them while on the earth. There was going to be more. And we know, yes, we have the Gospels, and then we have the book of Acts. And then we have everything that follows the book of Acts, going to the book of Revelation. All of that happens to be the law of Christ. Now, we come back to Galatians chapter 5, and we just begin in verse 19. Here is in this section, it speaks that of the fruit of the Spirit. We get to that in verse 22. But here are the works of the flesh, verse 19. Now, the works of the flesh are evident, which are, okay, so it's evident. Everybody can see this. It's evident. Adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, dissensions, heresies. Verse 21. Envy, murders, drunkenness, revelries, and the like, of which I tell you beforehand, just as I told you in times past, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. Verse 22, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness. Look at this last one, self-control. Against such there is no law. Now I'm reading all that for a reason, because social drinking, beginning that you're playing with fire. Absolute playing with fire. And we'll get to more of that in just a bit. But here is this works of the flesh, drunkenness, revelries. And one can say, okay, well, I'm going to drink, and I'm not going to get drunk. All right, here's some uncertainty for you. When are you drunk? That's the uncertain question number one. There's more uncertainties in this. When are you drunk? Is it when the police say you can't legally drive anymore? Is that when you're drunk? Is it when you're fall down drunk? Is that it? Is it when you're stumbling drunk? Is that it? Is it when you're tipsy? Is that it? Is it when you are slightly buzzed? Is that it? Where is the line? Because if you think there's a clear-cut line, the fact of the matter is, and we'll get more into this, fact of the matter is, and it is a known fact, from the first drink, it has the primary effect on you, just like any medication. And of course, it matters on the strength of medication as to how much it's going to have an effect on you. But just like any medication, it has the primary effect. And the primary effect of alcohol is what? Is to alter your ability to function, where you do not have that word in verse 23 of self-control. You will lose that. You will lose that. It could be slowly whittled away by some drink that is less alcoholic, or it can be quickly chopped away by something that is stronger. But it all leads to the same thing of less self-control. It is a loss of inhibitions, which is a long word, I realize that. What does that mean? That means of self-control. That means you have certain filters already built into you. Some don't use them like they should, but you have filters of there are certain things you know you don't say. There's certain behaviors you know you don't do. There's certain things that you will not do when you're in a sober mind. But you throw away the sober mind, there's no knowing. You throw that away, there is no knowing at all. Now, let's go to Proverbs chapter 20. Proverbs chapter 20. We've already looked. Now, we'll come back to it. We've already looked concerning the law of Christ, what the law of Christ has said about it. Now we come to Proverbs because alcohol hasn't changed and people haven't changed, and the purpose for drinking hasn't changed at all. But Proverbs chapter 20 verse 1, wine is a mocker, strong drink is a brawler, and whoever is led astray by it is not wise. Okay, now I want us to notice those last words, is not wise. Now, from American idioms, to say that something is not wise could mean it's not the wisest thing you could do. All right, that just wouldn't be wise. All right, it could mean, okay, you could do it, but it's not the best route. That's an American idiom. But from the book of Proverbs, to say that something is not wise means it's foolish. That's what it means. It means that this is where you don't need to be heading. And look, wine is a mocker, strong drink is a brawler, and whoever is led astray by it is not wise. Well, you begin dabbling in it, guess what is going to happen? You're going to be led astray by it. You're playing with fire. Not only can you not answer the question of when you are drunk, the next question is, will you be trapped by it? Because I can tell you right now, every alcoholic who's living today, unless there's something crazy about them, every alcoholic living today did not have it as one of their life's goal to become an alcoholic. They didn't have that goal. They didn't dream of, as a kid, I want to be the town drunk. They didn't have that. They didn't want that. And every alcoholic today wishes they weren't. They're they are taken by it, they are trapped, and here is that being led astray by it, and it is foolish. It is foolish because it is a mocker, it is a brawler. And here are these two questions that you cannot answer going into this. One, when are you actually drunk? Number two, and we've already made mention, but not in so many words, you drink, you go into the first shot of alcohol, you go in the first beer, and you are that much drunk. All right, and those aren't just my words. I'll show you in just a little bit. Those aren't just my words. There are those in the world who know that's correct. But with one drink, already there is a numbing effect that occurs. With that one drink, your senses have been changed. Those cautions, those cautionary filters that one already has in a sober mind, now being whittled away, bit by bit. And self-control soon leaves completely. And one can begin going down after not being able to answer that question of will you become trapped by it, to becoming trapped by it. It is playing with fire. How is it that you can have some people who drink on a regular basis and they're not alcoholics? But yet some do. Some are. What made the difference? I can tell you, I don't think anybody can answer that question. I don't think anybody can. Someone may say there's some kind of genetic thing. I don't know. There's a personality thing. I don't know. There's a basic weakness that one has that others don't have. I don't know. I can't answer that question in the least. I can't answer that. But here is this whole thing that you cannot know if you're playing with fire and you don't know what the outcome will be. Now, when I was a boy, my father told me, he said, and it's truth. He told me, he said, if you never take your first drink, you'll never have to worry about the last. It's that simple. If you don't take the first, you don't have to worry about the last. You don't have to worry for the rest of your life. And I remember, it's been years ago, it was a 60-some-odd-year-old man coming to me who had been a lifelong alcoholic, saying that he wanted to quit, and it had taken everything away from him. Everything. His family, his job, his home. He was living on the beach. It had taken everything away from him. He's a 60-year-old man. And he is wanting to get away from it. It's like I said, no alcoholic wants to be an alcoholic. They don't want it. But it ruined his life. And I just thought in my mind then, I can't answer it because I don't think I ever saw him again. But 10 years after that, if he lived, he'd have the same desire to not be an alcoholic. Whether he got away from it and conquered it, if that could be called that, got away from it and restrained himself, or continued down in it, he still would not want to be that alcoholic. And no one starts out on this path wanting that. Nobody. They want what they see from the commercials. And Satan is good at advertising. If he's good at anything, it is that. He can paint the pig, one may say. He can take something that's absolutely horrible and make it look glamorous. In your beer commercials, in your other harder liquor commercials, you never see the guy in the gutter. Nor do you see the one who's been shot at the nightclub. Nor do you see those going into the emergency room because they were in a wreck or were hit by a drunk driver. You don't see that. Why not? That's a truth, is it not? Yeah, but that doesn't sell alcohol. That doesn't sell, and with Satan, that doesn't sell the sin. That doesn't sell the sin at all. That's no temptation. You would avoid that. And a matter of self-control, I heard years ago from a man, it's very right. Is no thank you, I don't drink. That's the best response. No thank you, I don't drink. And I heard most recently, actually it's coming from a doctor, most recently, a rather young fella too, a medical physician, trying to get people to stop drinking. He himself he will confess, yeah, he used to drink, but now trying to get people to stop drinking. And he had quoted a strange poll I'd never heard of before, but evidently there's a percentage of people who don't even really like drinking. They just doing it because everybody else is doing it. It's a matter of social pressure. Because everybody else is doing it, what are you having? Well, then they will decide they're going to be drinking too. But they don't really enjoy it. Now, where there is social pressure, you might want to ask the question, is this the right thing to do? If we're bending from social pressure, is it the right thing to do to begin with? It's a good point to ask that question to yourself and evaluate, maybe before you make any kind of decision. Take an honest evaluation and take days or weeks to do it. It doesn't matter. Just take the time. Is it worth it? Should this be done just for the sake of a bunch of other people, even if they're my friends, even if they're family, just for their sake, just to be a part of them? Is this worth it? And the answer may be no. And when it comes to alcohol, it's definitely no. Now, I will say this. I have had very good friends. And growing up, they were my best friends. Some of them were my best friends. And I like them. I like their company. I like being with them. But when they were so much as tipsy as we might define it, I didn't like their company anymore. They became different people. We could have a great time, and we could have a lot of fun, and we could have just the things, the sense of humor and the sense of play and the sense of all these things that were just fantastic. But when they were drunk, it disappeared. It vanished. It's like what you're doing isn't even funny, and what you're doing is kind of stupid, and what you're doing is not only that, but it's annoying. And I don't want to be around you anymore. I don't want to be around you at all because you have now changed. I know you'll be back to normal tomorrow, but you have changed. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Now, we're going to look at some things, and you can check up on it if you want to, because you may have a hard time believing this. But I did my research. Okay? And I'm going to show you some what would be ungodly people who understood where alcohol leads. First are pirates, from the golden age of piracy. You may know it, you may not know it, but on every pirate ship they actually had articles of conduct. Things that some of them actually had 10 to mimic the 10 Commandments. Okay, but there would be some very common sense things, such as there'll be no fighting on board. Any fighting is going to be done on shore, and some of those even would say, and it's going to be by pistol or by sword. Okay, and others may say, if you are in a fight and you pick up an object to use as a weapon, that's the death penalty. Okay, so each ship, each captain and crew would have their own articles of conduct. This is coming from Edward Lowe, who was a pirate, and George Lowther, also a pirate. This was part of their articles of conduct. And this is number 9, by the way. This is commandment number 9. He that shall be guilty of drunkenness in time of engagement shall suffer what punishment the captain and majority of the company shall think fit. And that may be capital punishment. That is, you die because of that. Now, for a time of engagement, that meant any point you're on the ship, you better not be drunk, because there could be a time of engagement at any moment. There could be a naval vessel that just shows up. Well, you've got to do something. You've got to get out of there. You've got to fight. You've got to do something. Or there could be a target. So this literally meant you better not drink on the ship. Now, does that mean that pirates didn't drink? Well, yeah, of course they did. But they had common sense, and they knew there are times you better not be doing it. Now, I'll tell you an example. This goes back years ago. It is 1 o'clock in the morning, maybe a little later than that. It might have been 3 o'clock in the morning. I had to phone up our midwife because Catrice was in a great amount of pain. And this wasn't labor pain. She was in a great amount of pain. Now, the lady answered the phone. I'm thinking it may have been 3 in the morning. I don't know. It was extremely early in the morning. The lady answered, "Now, how drunk do you think I would allow her to be in answering that phone call? She's at home. She has a responsibility that is basically 24 hours. How drunk do you think I would like her to be? How drunk do you think you would want your surgeon to be if you're going into surgery? How many drinks would you allow your surgeon to have? If he needs a drink to go into surgery, you don't want that surgeon. You don't want him. Same thing concerning your pilot. How many drinks would you allow your pilot to have? If he needs a drink to be a pilot, he needs another occupation. He needs another occupation. Because it is a serious matter, we know it begins to dull the senses from the first drink. We know that. Now, the next example is actually coming from not a pirate, but a stand-up comedian who wrote the book Zen and the Art of Stand-Up Comedy. And he gives advice. One may ask, why were you reading that book? I read lots of things. Okay, so we have, his name is Jay Sankey, and he talked about the same thing, that going on stage, you have to be 100%. And some nights you just won't be, just because of something happening. It could be emotional, it could be health, it could be something, fatigue. But he said, you have to be 100%. And once again, he said, if you have to drink to be funny, you need a different occupation. And he said, and these are his words, if you have to have one drink going on, you are one drink drunk. And he said, your timing will be off. You will blunder over words. You won't remember the punchline. Something won't be right. Now, these are very worldly people, very worldly sources, but even they see the problem that's there. Even they see it. Now, let's go. We'll continue here in the book of Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 23, if you would. Proverbs chapter 23, beginning in verse 29. Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contentions? Who has complaints? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? Now, when I was in college, there was a lot of drinking that went on. And every now and then you'd see somebody who their face was scraped up. And you'd ask, what happened? Hey, you're genuinely concerned. What happened? Well, I got drunk and came out into the parking lot and I fell in the parking lot. Okay. Well, is there a lesson learned here? Is there a lesson? Or something happened at the bar and I got caught in the middle of it. It's like one fella said, who he was an employee of some kind of nightclub. He said, nothing good happens at these places after 1 p.m. 1 a.m., not 1 p.m. Nothing good ever happens there after 1 a.m. He said there are fights, calling police, there are people stumbling and falling over everything. He said nothing good ever happens then. And truly, who has woe, who has sorrow, who has contingents, who has complaints, who has wounds without cause? It's like a man that I met. He had been in prison, released from prison. He woke up. He woke up in jail. He woke up in jail after being drunk to find out he killed 2 people in the night. And he had no idea, completely unaware of it. He killed 2 people while driving, didn't know who they were. And you think that didn't bother him, even after prison? Yes, it did bother him. It still bothered him. And that is the thing. Self-control is thrown out. You don't know where you might end up in all of this because it's a very slippery pathway. It's extremely slippery. Who has redness of eyes? Verse 30. Those who linger long at the wine, those who go in search of mixed wine, do not look on wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it swirls around smoothly. At last it bites like a serpent and stings like a viper. Every one of these, some more severe than others, every one of these that I just mentioned, sobered up to discover they had a rough night. And with one man, he's going to be in prison for years because of that. Something that he was not in control of. You want to have self-control. You want to be in control of every thought, of every decision, of every action. You want to be in as much control as you possibly can. Now, why hamper that? Satan gets a better handle on you if you don't have that. We have just finished the whole armor of God. Where does this fit in the whole armor of God? It doesn't. It doesn't. No one goes into battle All right, here is that whole idea of woe. There's nothing good about it. No situation is improved by alcohol. None. Whether it's a celebration or whether it's grief. Nothing is made better. I had a friend. He had bouts of depression. He told me that. I never really witnessed it. But he told me he had bouts of depression. And you know what? Going to the bottle, going to alcohol did not help. And that friend lifted up his eyes in Hades. Probably then realizing what he had done, he shot himself. He was depressed. Alcohol only made it worse. He drives off to a park and he shoots himself. Now that's not the end of him. That's the end of his life here. But he would have lifted his eyes up in Hades to realize what he just did and what a horrible decision that all was. What the whole path of it was extremely bad. Every bit of it. Because nothing is improved by it, and things only get worse by it. As the one man said, nothing good happens in a bar or in a nightclub after 1 a.m. And the old juke joints, just think of it as places to go drink on the weekends. The old juke joints, they had the nickname. They all had the nickname of the bucket of blood or something very similar. Why was that? Because there'd be stabbings, there'd be shootings, there'd be fights, there would be police having to break it up, there'd be ambulance having to come tote somebody off to the emergency room. It was always happening. It was always happening. Well, what at the beginning of the evening when everyone was pretty much sober, was that an issue? No, that wasn't an issue at all. Everybody's behaving themselves. Everybody's doing okay. It wasn't until you introduce alcohol and everything goes wrong and all that. Everything goes terribly wrong. Now, let's go to Ephesians chapter 5, if you would. Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 18. Once again, we're out of the Old Testament, but the principles in the Old Testament, you can still hold on to those principles and understand that mankind hasn't changed at all. We're not under the old covenant, but we're under the law of Christ. And do not be drunk with wine, in which is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit. We'll just continue on, verse 19. Speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your hearts to the Lord. Now, we start off with do not be drunk with wine, which is dissipation. And we come back to the question, which is a very hazy question, when are you drunk? It can be a very hazy question. And the first answer to that would have to be when you start on that path. When you start on that path, you're there. When you start on that path, you're into some very slippery ground in all this. Some very slippery ground. Now, I want you to notice something. Let's go to, we go from here to 1 Timothy. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 23. Here is Dr. Paul, we could call him, his advice giving Timothy. And here's the thing. If it were okay for Timothy to be drinking wine socially, this advice wouldn't be needed. This advice wouldn't be regarded at all. He's not drinking. And Paul is not drinking. They're not drinking. They're not drinking socially or casually, but medicinally, that's a different matter. Okay, medicinally is a completely different matter. So, chapter 5, verse 23, no longer drink only water, but use a little wine for your stomach's sake and your frequent infirmities. Here is medicine. What is wine good for? What's alcohol good for? Well, it's medicinal. That's what it's good for. And there are other things that alcohol is used for. Certainly not for consumption, but for cleaning things. It's a solvent to some things. It's a very powerful substance and depends on which you have. But here it's obvious Timothy doesn't drink. Not alcohol. And he has to be told, here is something for your stomach's sake and your frequent infirmities. Something was wrong with Timothy. He's ill, and this is a medicine for him. Now, obviously, when the illness is over, you don't need the medicine anymore. When my mom had major surgery years ago, they gave her, and she's not the only one, they gave her a little clicker, little button. And it would distribute a certain amount, and it wouldn't just dump it in because that'd kill you, but it would supply a type of morphine. into her if she felt like she needed it. All right, morphine, by the way, is illegal outside of medical uses. All right, that's illegal. But for medical uses, it is very much legal. Now, when she was out of surgery and recovering, she did that. But out of the hospital, no more. She didn't need it anymore. Therefore, she's not using it anymore. She's not using it because it's for a specific purpose, not for casual use. Not for casual use. And the same thing holds true to any sort of drug that's going to affect you mentally, that's going to affect you. That you take it for an infirmity, you take it for something that is necessary medically, and then afterward you stop, which means casual use of morphine is wrong. Social use of morphine and drug use, that's wrong. Same thing concerning alcohol. And there is, as we have said, the effect that it has on your body and that it can have on your life. And he who's trapped by it is not wise. He that starts on that path also, and it's obvious Timothy didn't, also not wise. Now, there's more things we could say. There's a lot more things we could say. But this will have to be for today. Of understanding there are certain things that require us to be sober and sober-minded and have exactly that fruit of the Spirit known as self-control. Don't just overlook that. That is a fruit of the Spirit. You get rid of self-control, you don't have the fruit of the Spirit anymore. You don't have it anymore. Now, this is not evangelistic, but it is one of pointing out a matter of morality and pointing out a matter of the law of Christ and principles that have been around for a very long time, because the human body hasn't changed all these years. Neither is alcohol or the use of it. It hasn't changed all these years. But we need to understand what Christ wants out of us, and it is the best for us. The best. Belong to Christ. We ask this morning, if you need to respond to the invitation, that you come as we stand and sing.